God spoke the universe into being. His words birthed stars and galaxies, turned dust to humanity, the massive to the minutia. Words have power. Words have authority. So, what are you saying?
Good morning, church. Good morning and happy Father's Day to you. What a joy to be here this morning that we can celebrate a Sunday and we can worship our God together. Now, we just kickstarted a new sermon series called Spoken Words. This is week number 2. Last week, Pastor Brett kickstarted the sermon series by talking about the weight of words. Our words carry weight. Our words matters. Because what we say can potentially crush other people's spirit if we are not careful. But what we say can also lift people up. We can speak life into other people's situation. So our words matters. Now, last week, Pastor Brett also referenced a particular medical doctor, Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor who worked in the General Hospital of Vienna in the mid-1800s. I want to piggyback on that story. So let me just give you a quick overview of the story. Back at that time, in this particular hospital, there are 2 clinics that help deliver babies. So pregnant women would just go to those maternity wards to give birth to their babies. Now, Dr. Semmelweis did a research on that. He realized that one particular clinic that was staffed by medical doctors. And this particular clinic's fatality rate, meaning women giving birth and then they die. So this particular clinic that was staffed by medical doctors, the fatality rate is actually almost 5 times higher than the other clinic. Now, you would expect an opposite result, right? So he looked into that. And if you were here last week, you know the answer. The answer is that some of the doctors on this side, they would perform autopsies. They would cut up deceased bodies in order to study them. So they would perform autopsies and then without washing their hands, they go to that clinic to deliver babies. Infection. So that is such a tragic story. And as he continues his study, he also realized that for those medical doctors who would wash their hands with chlorinated solution, the fatality rate will drop significantly. Now, being rational human beings, being medical doctors, scientists, if you have a scientific finding like that, what would you expect the doctors and the hospital to do? You would expect everybody just washing their hands, right? It's not the case. Sadly, it did not happen. In fact, some of the medical doctors are the ones who resisted washing their hands the most. Why? Why? If they would just wash their hands, so many pregnant women's lives, so many moms' lives would be saved. So why? I want to look into this story. Now, to do that, I want to bring in a communication model that I'm sure you know that. In a typical conversation, in a typical communication, there is a person who does the talking, and there is another person who's listening. So somebody is talking and somebody is listening, and in between is the content of that communication. And there is one particular type of conversation that we call feedback conversation. Now, feedback is simple. It is simply one person telling another person something. Now, what is that something? That something may be appreciative. That something may be positive. It looks like this. Hey, thank you for doing that. You have done such a good job. So that is an appreciative feedback. Now, feedback can also be instructive or corrective. Something like, hey, thank you for doing that. That is awesome. But if you would change it slightly, we will have a much better result. So it can be instructive or corrective. Now, with this feedback model in mind, I want to bring you to Dr. Semmelweis' situation. Now, in his situation, Dr. Semmelweis himself is the feedback giver. He has something to say to the other doctors. And that something is both instructive and corrective. So the content is wash your hands and reduce the fatality rate. Simple, scientific result. And you also have feedback receivers, and in this case, it's the medical doctors. Now, once again, being rational human being, being scientists, being medical doctors, what do you expect them to do? Wash your hands and save life. Sadly, that is not the case. So I just want to look further into the situation. What is the interaction between the feedback giver and the feedback receiver like? How do they interact with one another? So let me show you a diagram. It's a very simple diagram, but very instructive. There are feedback givers. Some of the feedback givers are good givers, some are bad givers, and some are really bad givers. So we ignore the third one. How about the listeners, the receivers? We have really good listeners, we have bad listeners, and we have really bad listeners. So we ignore the third one. Now, you get the point, right? So if you table it out that way, you have 4 different quadrants. So let me just go through these 4 different quadrants with you in a very brief manner. Okay, case number 1. Let's go to quadrant number 1. Here, you have a bad feedback giver who just keep offending people, like Dr. Semmelweis. And you have bad listener who is absolutely defensive. What do you think the result will look like? Not good. One person keep offending the other person keep defending himself or herself. Nothing good will come out from this particular feedback conversation. So let's move to the opposite end, quadrant number 4. Now, right here, you have a good feedback giver that is careful, sensitive, and gentle. At the same time, you have a good feedback listener who is humble, secure, and ready to learn. Now, what do you expect here? That is the best possible scenario, right? A good feedback giver who is caring, kind, compassionate, and very good in delivering the message. And you have a good listener who is willing to learn, willing to receive. That is the best possible situation. In fact, both of them will appreciate one another. Both of them will learn something. And both of them will try their best to come up with the best possible solution. Is there something that I should change, or is there something that we can change the project to make everything much better? Quadrant number 4 is the best possible scenario. Now, how about quadrant 2 and 3? Now, things get a little bit trickier right here. Now, let's go to quadrant number 2. What if you have a good feedback giver? A good feedback giver who is careful, sensitive, and gentle. But you have a lousy listener who is insecure, defensive, emotionally distant. What do you think? Well, no. I don't think the conversation will go anywhere. Now, despite the fact that the giver is careful, kind, compassionate, the lousy receiver will just filter out everything, including the good things in that particular conversation. So if you are in quadrant number 2, despite of the good feedback giver, the result won't be good if the listener is lousy. How about quadrant number 3? This is interesting. Now, what if you have a bad feedback giver who is rude and insensitive? But in this case, you have a good listener who is humble, secure, able to listen well, and ready to learn. Well, you know what? Something good might still come out from the conversation. Why? Despite of the lousy giver, the good listener would be able to filter out all the bad things and glean the good things within that conversation. So we might get something good out of it. Okay, with this diagram, I want to ask you one question, church. Who holds the power? Who holds the power to the result of the conversation? Is it the giver or is it the listener? Easy, right? It's the listener. Why? Because the listener is the one who decides whether or not to let information in. Okay, church, now, don't get me wrong here. What I am not saying is that the feedback giver is not important. This is not what I said. If you are in HR, in training, if you are a team leader, if you are an employee, please try your best to be a good feedback giver. Because when you are good at giving feedback, you help me, you help us. You help those of us who are receiving information from you. You are important. So please be a good feedback giver. What I'm saying here is this, that we, the receiver, actually holds the key. Let me say it this way. We as receivers, we actually have the veto power. Regardless of how good the feedback is, we have the veto power to not listen at all. So church, this is something that I want to look into today. With this in mind, I want to bring you into the Bible. I want to bring you back to about 3,000 years ago. And let's do a case study to see what we can learn from the Bible. 3,000 years ago, it was the time when Israel started their monarchy. It was the time when the kings started to show up. Now, many of you know the first king was King Saul. He was a good-looking guy, tall guy. And then you have King David. Remember how the Bible described him? He is a man after God's own heart. And then King Solomon. He was the wisest man on earth. You guys know all three of them, but I bet none of you know this guy, Rehoboam. You know, this is a strange name. So Rehoboam, he was one of the sons of King Solomon, and he did succeed. Solomon became the king. Now, back in the days when King Rehoboam became king, they did not do the coronation in Jerusalem. Instead, they did it in a place called Shechem, which is about 49 kilometers north of Jerusalem. It's the modern-day Nablus. So everybody went there. Everybody just go there to crown the new king. After that, there was a conversation between two groups of people. On the one hand, you have the people. On the other hand, you have the king. I want to show you the conversation, and it looks exactly like a feedback conversation. So let me show you the conversation. So the people are talking. So the people, they come to the king and they speak to King Rehoboam and say, "My king, your father Solomon put a heavy yoke on us. But now please lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke that he put on us, and we will serve you." It's a very typical feedback section. Okay, who is the feedback giver? Is the people. Who is the feedback receiver? The listener is the king. Now, how about the content? The content is, please lighten the royal burden and we will serve you. Hey, church, this is a valid request, right? It's a valid request. And in fact, if you look into this request, it's actually quite carefully crafted. The people did not accuse the king. In fact, the people say, "Hey, my king, it is your father Solomon, it is he. But now that you are the new king, you can help us. You can do something about it." I think the feedback content is pretty okay. But how did the king reply? King Rehoboam answered them, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." Go away for 3 days. Why? I think in his mind, he was thinking, well, I actually don't know I actually don't know whether I like your idea or not. You ask me to lighten the royal burden. That means my tax income will be reduced. That means I will have less money to spend. And by the way, I'm the new king. I should establish my authority. Why should I listen to you? Well, I have not made up my mind yet, so please leave me. Give me 3 days and I will come back to you after that. And maybe deep down in his heart, he was also thinking, I need more advice. I need to ask people what to do. So maybe that is the reason. But in the end, he said, give me 3 days. And so the people went away. Now, what do you think the king did during that 3 days? Number one, he will be just thinking a lot. What should I do? What should I do? Do I like this? Do I like that? And the fact is, he actually conducted 2 more feedback conversations. One with the elders of the kingdom. One with the elders who served King Solomon, Rehoboam's father. What does it mean? It means that this is a group of veterans. They know what they are doing. They have experience running a country. They know the history. They are competent and they are able to advise in a good way. They know what they are doing. Now, the second group is the young people who grew up with King Rehoboam. They are probably as young as the king or maybe even as naive as the king. So let's go to the 2 feedback conversations. So number 1, then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father, Solomon, during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer these people? Okay, look at that. How would you advise me? Do you see the distance? How would you advise me? You will see something different at a later time. So how would you advise me? Now, this group of veteran government officials who are competent and have experience, they replied, if today, my king, you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant. Church, the idea of servant leadership did not happen 20, 30 years ago. It happened 3,000 years ago. So what did the elders say? Basically, they say, hey, my king, you are the new king. Why don't you adopt the servant leadership model? Why don't you become the servant? If you serve them well, they will serve you. If you serve them well, they will follow you wherever you go. They will do whatever you ask of them. Wise counsel indeed. But how did the king respond? But King Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him. Right there, immediately, he didn't like what the elders said. I always wonder why people reject other people's opinion. I always wonder, with that good advice, why would the young king reject it? Okay, let's bring it to us. Why would you and me, why would we reject other people's good advice? I read a few books, I did some internet research, and I want to share with you something. I want to share with you what I find. Why do people reject feedback? I'm going to be very brief. There are 7 things that I pick out. Number 1, the content is wrong. What you say is wrong. I disagree with your assessment. I disagree with what you said, and I think you are wrong. The content is wrong. That is the most common reason. Number 2, they get me wrong. They got my motivation wrong. They got my situation wrong. They got my emotion wrong. Basically, they got me wrong. Everything about me, they don't understand. If you don't understand me, why should I respond to your advice? Number 3, outdated opinion. Okay, this comes mostly from the young people. The young people will look at me or look at older people and say, what do you know? What you said is not wrong, but remember, you walk with dinosaurs. You have no telephone. What you say may be true at that time, but not true now. Okay, fair. But wait. Young people, this particular outdated opinion thing goes both ways. Do you see older people looking at the younger people and say, kid, what do you know about life? Where were you when I started my business? I eat salt more than eat rice. So listen to me. Do you see that? It goes both ways. None of us is exempted by this. Okay, how about this? Preferences. Well, elders, you think that servant leadership is the best. I disagree with you. I think for my generation, leadership should be strong, even on the verge of being a dictator. We need strong leadership for our country. Maybe it's just a preference. Or how about this? The timing is wrong. Come on, I am going to a party and you want to talk to me about funeral, it's the wrong time. The content may not be wrong, but the timing is wrong. Now, the last two deal with the person who gives the feedback. The first one, they lack credibility. You know, who do you think you are? Why should I listen to you? I don't think you are credible. I challenge your credibility. I don't think I can listen to you. If I don't trust you, how can I receive your advice and feedback? And finally, the seventh one, I doubt their intention. What they say may not be wrong, but I really doubt their intention. I think they might be saying it to manipulate me, or they might want me to go a certain course so that they will be benefited by that. Man, these are all valid things, right? They are all valid. But look, do you know that perfect feedback never exists? Do you know that you can always find something wrong in the feedback? If it is not the feedback that is wrong, it is the person who is wrong, or the timing is wrong, or the atmosphere is wrong, or the venue is wrong. You will always find something wrong with the feedback. So what do? You reject every single one of them? Remember what we talked about earlier? Who holds the key? Who holds the power? Who holds the veto power to the result of a feedback session? It's the listener. It's not the giver. So it's on us, man. It's on us. We are the one responsible for filtering the bad things and to receive the good thing. We have the responsibility to do it. It's on us. Let me share with you a quote that I learned a few years ago, and honestly, it scared me. Pastor Andy Stanley is one of my favorite pastors in the US. He said, leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. Listen to him. Leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. Why? Because eventually, if your people think, if your people know that you do not listen, what will they do? They will stop talking altogether. And sometimes they will leave. Leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. So leaders is on us. Hey, but I know what you're thinking. Some of you may be thinking, I'm not a CEO, I do not have my company, I'm not a manager, I'm not a team leader, so I'm off the hook. Well, no. I'm going to catch you, okay, one way or the other. Let me take away the word leaders and let me supply it with a different word. And since this is the Father's Day, let me just put the word husband. So husband who refuse to listen will eventually have a wife who has nothing to say. Well, maybe not. Okay, let me change it. How about wife? Wife who refuses to listen will eventually have a husband who has nothing to say. Well, we men do not talk anyway. And if we realize that you do not want to listen, we will shut up for the rest of our life. That's it. Okay, you are not married, single people. Okay, let me replace it with friends. Friends who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. They learn their lesson. They will not try to waste their time on you if they know that you are not willing to listen. Okay, you got my point right here. So let me show you something else. Insecure leaders surround themselves with yes men, yes people. But effective leaders surround themselves with people, what? With people who challenge them. So it's on us. So ask yourself this question. Who do you surround yourself with? Who do you surround yourself with? Do you surround yourself with only people who always affirm your opinion? Or do you surround yourself with people who love you enough to challenge you? Do you only surround yourself with yes men, yes women, yes people? Or do you surround yourself with people who love you enough to tell you things that you do not want to listen? Man, it's on us. It's on us. It's our responsibility to make sure that we have people around us who love us enough to tell us the truth. Adam Grant is a wonderful organizational psychologist at Wharton. So this is what he said. Don't listen to people, don't listen to people because you agree with their answers. Listen to them because you respect the intellectual integrity they bring to their questions. And then you learn more from people who challenge your thought process than from those who affirm your conclusions. Don't just surround yourself with yes people. Surround yourself with people who love you enough to challenge you and to tell you things that you do not even want to listen. Let me bring you back to the Bible. So King Rehoboam rejected the elders. What did he do next? But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him, and then he consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" Look at that. King Rehoboam rejected the wise counsel of the elders. And then instead, he looked to the young men who grew up with him. This group of young men, they have every single reason to please the king. Why? Because they want a place in the court. They have conflict of interest. And they have every single reason to tell the king what the king wants to hear. And by the way, on the king's part, look at this. How should we? After he rejected the elders, he has already identified himself with this group of young men. He is willing to follow the young man's advice, and the young men are ready to please him. Perfect combination, but disastrous. The young man who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now, my king, tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist, and then my father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions.'" Only young men can say that. Young, naive men without experience will say that. But sadly, after the two feedback conversations, the rest is history. As I mentioned earlier, leaders who refuse to listen will soon be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. They will just shut up, and many of them will simply leave. And people did leave. And not just people. In fact, Israel have 12 tribes, right? After this conversation, 10 out of the 12 tribes left. they formed their own kingdom. King Rehoboam was left with only 2 tribes, the tribe of Judah and a much smaller tribe named Benjamin. King Rehoboam is such a contrast with his grandfather, King David. Many of you know King David's story. One particular story is famous. Remember when he was still a young king, one day he was on the rooftop and he saw a woman bathing over there in another rooftop, and he wanted that woman. Through an evil scheme, King David had Bathsheba's husband Uriah killed in a battle. It looks like an accident, but it's not. He thought nobody would know, but God knows. And God actually asked the prophet Nathan. Now, a prophet is a person speaking on God's behalf. God asked the prophet Nathan to go to King David to confront him. Now, who in his right mind would like to confront a king of murder and adultery? No, he would just kill you with a blink of an eye. But you know what? You know what? The prophet Nathan loved King David enough to risk his own life. So he went. He confronted the king. And do you know the result? You know the result. After being confronted with the fact, this is what David said. Then King David said to the prophet Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. He has the humility to receive the feedback, the corrective feedback. And that's why, church, and that's why David was called a man after God's own heart. And this comment doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from God himself. God himself said, David is a man after my own heart. 2 kings, 2 totally different responses to advices, to feedbacks. So what can we learn? Firstly, when people come to us, please learn to listen. When they come to us, please learn to listen. And when we listen, please learn to understand, not to attack. Husbands, when your wife comes to you with feedback, don't just keep jogging notes and then you can fight back later. No, don't do that. Listen to understand. Filter out the bad things, but glean the good things. Learn to listen and then listen to understand. But don't just wait for people to come to you. Don't just be passive. Please be active. Please take initiative to seek out feedback. It's on us. It's on you. It's on me. Now, I want to tell you why. Firstly, it is a mark of maturity. When you seek feedback, when you take the initiative to seek feedback, that is a mark of your maturity. And number 2, from a very practical perspective, let me show you this diagram. Okay, now you know I like diagram. I do. Now, this Johari window, many of you know it. So it deals with 2 questions. What do I know about myself? And what do they know about me? So there are things that I know about myself, then there are things that I don't know about myself. How about my friends, other people? There are things that they know about me, and there are things that they don't know about me. So here you have 4 quadrants. The open quadrant is this: I know, they know. I know this, they know this, so it is in the open. I want you to focus on the green one. This is the quadrant of they know, but I don't know. Everybody on earth knows this about me, and the only person on earth that doesn't know is me. So what do you call this? Blind spots. Blind spots. My friend, let me have a confession right here. I know I have blind spots. I have glaring blind spots. That part I know. What I don't know is I don't know where they are. And that is the problem. So I need you to help me. I need my team members help me. So that's why every year I will go to my small team in RECC. Oh, my team is awesome. Seriously, my team is really awesome. Every single year, I will go to them and ask them many questions. And these are the 4 questions that I ask all the time. Number 1, what do you like about me? I do want to know, I'm a normal human being. So what do you appreciate about me? So that is a good conversation opener. Now, seriously, question number 2. What are the things about me that annoyed you? I know for sure that I have annoyed you. I just don't know when, and I just don't know how. Is it about something that I say? Is it something about my behavior? Or is it simply because of my demeanor? I know I annoyed you, but I don't know how. Can you tell me? I just want to be your friend. I want to be a better human being. Okay, number 3. How can I change my behavior so that you will feel more comfortable working with me? I know I make you feel uncomfortable. I know, but I don't know how. Is it something that I do, something that I say, or is it about my demeanor? Can you help me? I'm your friend. Can you help me? I am so thankful for my team. Some of them gave me really, really good feedback. One of them said, Albert, you talk too much. Okay, I will learn. So I did. Please help me. I just want to be a better human being. I want to be a better team leader. Okay, question number 4. To be a better team leader, what are the things that I should, 4 things. To be a better team leader, what are the things that I should do more, do less, stop doing altogether, or start doing something new? I have blind spots. I want to be a better human being. I want to be a better team leader. So please help me. I need your help. And I cannot wait for them to come to me. It's on me. It's on me as a team leader to go to them and ask them these questions. Let me close by quoting one more time from the Bible. You know this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. If you are the one giving feedback, please be slow. Please be kind to us. Please help us. Please be considerate. Please be slow to speak. Now, if we are the people receiving feedback, we need to listen. Be quick to listen. Don't reject people outright. We need to be quick to listen. We need to be humble. We need to be ready to receive, ready to learn. And for both of us, both the giver and the receiver, be very slow to become angry. In the end, why do we do this? Because I just want to be a better human being. I just want to be a better Christian. Or using our Christian lingo, I want to be a better disciple of Jesus. I want to have one step closer to Jesus so that when I go to see my Father in heaven, He will say, "Well done, my child." Let me pray for us. Father God, we praise You for today. We praise You for this time that we can study the Bible together. We thank You for the story of Rehoboam and such a warning to us. And the story of David, such a good example for us. God, help us to be humble. Help us to be ready to receive, because there is power in receiving feedback well. God, thank You for putting people around us who love us. I pray that we will have the courage to seek them out so that they will help us to become better follower of Jesus. Thank You. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.